physically accompany him to heaven to be presented there as the wave offering required by the Feast of Firstfruits. Therefore, if they were indeed Yahshua's wave offering, he would have had to offer them from the earth in resuscitated but still mortal bodies like that of Lazarus. That's problematical, to say the least. I find it far more likely that he himself was the wave offering. Mary Magdalene encountered the newly risen Yahshua near the tomb on Resurrection Day. He told her,
"Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. But go to my brethren and say to them, I am ascending to my Father, and to your Father, and to my God, and your God." John 20:17.
Yet later the same day he was seen taking a leisurely stroll with two followers on the road to Emmaus, chatting with Peter and then meeting with all of the disciples except Thomas. He was apparently no longer in a hurry, no longer concerned about not yet having ascended to his Father. What changed? I believe, speculation factor of 2, that immediately after seeing Mary in the garden, he did ascend to his Father, presenting himself as the required wave offering, and returning to earth afterward to spend 40 days instructing his disciples. Either way, the Feast of Firstfruits was fulfilled, literally and on schedule, in the resurrection of Yahshua from the dead. That's 3 for 3. We're on a roll. The first 3 feasts were within a few days of each other, and in the minds of the celebrants were lumped into one, commonly called the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or simply Passover. Yahweh had specified 3 separate feasts, not one 3-day event, because of their individual prophetic significance. The 4th celebration was 7 weeks later, and thus is known as the Feast of Weeks, or Shavuot.
"And you shall count for yourself from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be completed. Count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then you shall offer a new grain offering to Yahweh."
The timing is reminiscent of Jubilee, except that we're talking about days instead of years.
"You shall bring from your dwellings 2 wave loaves of 2/10 of an ephah. They shall be of fine flour. They shall be baked with leaven. They are the firstfruits to Yahweh. And you shall offer with the bread 7 lambs of the first year, without blemish, 1 young bull and 2 rams. They shall be as a burnt offering to Yahweh, with their grain offering and their drink offerings, an offering made by fire for a sweet aroma to Yahweh. Then you shall sacrifice 1 kid of the goats as a sin offering, and 2 male lambs of the first year as a sacrifice of a peace offering. The priest shall wave them with the bread of the firstfruits as a wave offering before Yahweh, with the 2 lambs. They shall be holy to Yahweh for the priest. And you shall proclaim on the same day that it is a set-apart convocation to you, and you shall do no customary work on it. It shall be a statute forever in all your dwellings throughout your generations. Leviticus 23:15-21.
We are now into the 3rd month of the Jewish calendar, Sivan, which falls in May or June. 50 days after the Feast of Firstfruits, hence the Greek name Pentecost, on the 6th day of Sivan, the people were to observe a holy convocation, a special Sabbath, with wave, that is, grain offerings, burnt offerings, drink offerings, sin offerings, and peace offerings. There was a lot going on. The firstfruits reference concerns the wheat harvest, as the previous feast marked the barley harvest. Indeed, this seems to be the primary rationale for the original festival.
You shall count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin to count the 7 weeks from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain. Then you shall keep the Feast of Weeks to Yahweh for your God, with the tribute of a free will offering from your hand, which you shall give as Yahweh your God blesses you. You shall rejoice before Yahweh your God, and your son and your daughter, your male servant and your female servant, the Levite who is within your gates, the stranger and the fatherless and the widow who are among you, at the place where Yahweh your God chooses to make his name abide. And you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and you shall be careful to observe these statutes. Deuteronomy 16:9-12.
We should note a few interesting wrinkles in this festival. First, it is described as a free will offering, predicated on past, not future, blessings of God. Also, it seems to be quite democratic in its character when compared to Passover. Everybody's welcome, not only ceremonially clean Jews, not only family members, but the servants, the Levites who had no territorial inheritance of their own, and even the outcasts and unfortunates of society, including the Gentiles among them. Coming the day after the seventh Sabbath, past the Feast of Unleavened Bread, Pentecost is thereby designed to fall on a Sunday, which it did in 33. This is the only feast of the seven where the leavened bread is allowed, indicating a come-as-you-are state of mind. Yes, there is a peace offering. Yes, there's a sin offering. But there's also openness, forgiveness, rejoicing, and worship. Is all this ringing any bells? It should. It describes the church, the ecclesia, or at least what it's supposed to be. Look around you. If you find Christianity a closed, judgmental, dour, and introspective experience, something's wrong. God didn't design it that way. Perhaps the problem is that you have left the place where Yahweh your God chooses to make his name abide. Perhaps the problem is that you have forgotten that you were once a slave. I'm not extrapolating here. I'm just getting a little ahead of myself. The fulfillment of the prophecy of the Feast of Weeks is found in the book of Acts, where the feast's common name, Pentecost, is a dead giveaway.
When the day of Pentecost had fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven, as a mighty rushing wind, and it filled the whole house where they were sitting. Then there appeared to them divided tongues, as of fire, and one sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance. And then those who gladly received Peter's word were baptized. And that day about 3,000 souls were added to them. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, in the breaking of bread, and in prayers. And then reverence came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. Now all who believed were together, and had all things in common, and sold their possessions and goods, and divided them among all, as anyone had need. So, continuing daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God, and having favor with all the people. And God added to the church daily those who were being saved. Acts 2:1-4, 41-47.
Luke here has just related the birth of the church. Apparently nobody saw it coming, and nobody figured it would continue for as long as it has, almost 2,000 years now. Before the crucifixion and after the resurrection, the disciples all thought that Yahshua would set up his earthly kingdom immediately, certainly within their own lifetimes. Peter, who had pointed out to Yahshua that he and the others had left everything to follow him, expected to be somebody in the kingdom. But the Master gently popped his bubble, revealing to him exactly what kind of gruesome death he would suffer. The message for Peter and the rest of us was, "Occupy till I come. Feed my sheep." At first it seems ironic that of the 7, quote, Jewish feasts, the middle one would foreshadow a long hiatus for God's involvement with the nation of Israel. On the other hand, the Way, as it was called, was considered a Jewish sect for at least its first century. Christians today should thankfully recognize their Jewish legacy. God has not abandoned Israel in favor of the church, as has been taught by some well-meaning but misinformed theologians. The artist has merely set aside a half-finished painting for a while so he can work on a new canvas. He'll finish his masterpiece when he's good and ready. Or perhaps a better metaphor would be that of a playwright who has relegated one of his main characters to the wings in Act 2, knowing that he intends to bring her back in and tie up all the loose ends in Act 3. The miraculous history of the Jewish people in the 20th century is proof to anyone with his eyes open that God is still interested in them. The Feast of Pentecost, and indeed all 4 Levitical celebrations we have looked at so far, make it clear that Israel is the chosen vehicle for unveiling his grand plan. They are the apple of God's eye, but they aren't the only fruit in his basket. That makes 4 out of 4 feasts, or mikras in Hebrew, holy convocations, that are obviously prophetic of important events in the unfolding plan of Yahweh. Each of the 4 speaks poignantly of the Messiah's role in the salvation of mankind, with detail after detail pointing directly and unambiguously toward Yahshua, the Anointed One. And each of them was fulfilled on the very day of its mandated celebration. That fact alone makes the odds against their coincidental fulfillment over 16 billion to 1. As interesting as that is, it becomes downright earth-shaking when you realize that there are still 3 more annual feasts yet to be fulfilled. These all took place in the autumn, in Tishri, the 7th and final month of the Jewish religious calendar, which falls in September or October. Each of them predicts some yet-to-be-revealed event in Yahweh's grand plan. And more to the point, they will complete the picture Yahweh is painting. They will be the cue that begins the final act of his play. The 5th feast is called the Feast of Trumpets, or Yom Teruah. It was celebrated on the first day of Tishri. It is often erroneously referred to as the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, or the head of the year, because that date has begun their civil calendar from the time of the Babylonian captivity, even though Yahweh placed the new year in the spring and never changed his mind. On the 10th of Tishri came Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, seen as the most sacred day of the year. And 5 days later, the Jewish religious calendar concluded with Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, or Booths. We'll discuss what each of these days holds in store for our future when we reach the appropriate points in our chronological study. Based on the first 4 feasts, I expect significant events in the plan of God to occur on the very days specified in the Torah. The spring feasts have all come to pass. The fall feasts are yet to come. It's easy to see that God has given us these signs to teach us something. What is it? So far, we have learned that the death, burial, and resurrection of his Messiah were to be followed by a parenthesis, the time of the church, the ecclesia. But the preponderance of prophecy leads us to the inescapable conclusion that Israel will once again be the focus of God's attention at the end of the age. They have waited in the wings for 1900 years. The last half-century has seen them walk back onto the stage, but they haven't yet spoken their lines. What does the great playwright have in store for them and for us?